Hi friends, now we are seeing the topic polar plot. The polar plot is a plot of magnitude of g of j omega versus the phase angle of g of j omega. It is the plot of magnitude of g of j omega transfer function. It is a transfer function versus phase angle of g of j omega as omega varied from 0 to infinity. It is the plot of magnitude of g of j omega versus phase angle of g of j omega as omega varied from 0 to infinity on polar coordinates. The polar plot plotted an polar graph sheet. The polar graph sheet has radial lines and concentric circles. It is like this polar graph sheet. It has concentric lines around origin and radial lines. It has radial lines like this. The polar graph sheet like this only. The radial lines gives phase angle. The radial line gives phase angle, and concentric lines gives magnitude. Based on the phase angle of g of j omega, we can point the magnitude of g of j omega. If phase angle is anti-clockwise direction gives positive phase, anti-clockwise direction gives positive angle, and clockwise direction gives negative angle. This is a polar graph sheet, and we can identify, we can determine the type and order of the system by looking the polar plot only. For minimum phase system transfer function, for minimum phase transfer function with only poles, type of the system determines the quadrant at which the polar plot starts, and the order of the system determines quadrant at which the polar plot ends. First of all, we have to see what is the minimum phase system. A system with all poles and zeros exists on the left half of S plane is called minimum phase system. A system with all poles and zeros on the left half of S plane is called minimum phase system. For minimum phase system, the type number determines where the polar plot starts. For minimum phase system, type number determines starting quadrant of polar plot. It is very important. Type number determines the starting quadrant of polar plot, and order determines ending quadrant of polar plot. Just look at these two figures. If type 0, the polar plot starts in from here for type 0. If type is 1, type number is 1, then polar plot starts from here. Type 1 system. For type 2 system, the polar plot starts from here for type 2. If type number 3, for type 3 system, the polar plot starts from here for type 3. This is the based on the type number, and based on the order of the system, the ending quadrant of polar plot like this. If order is 1, then polar plot ends in quadrant 4. This is the end point of polar plot if order is 1. First order system. For first order system. For second order system. For second order. For third order. For fourth order. And repeat is continuously. And one of the notes, two most important points. First one is, when a pole is added to the system, then the polar plot end point will shift by -90. Look at, when a pole, when a pole is added to a system, the polar plot shift, the polar plot end point shifted by -90 degrees. When a 0 is added to the system, the polar plot end point shifted by +90 degrees. -90 means clockwise, +90 means anti-clockwise. When a pole is added to a system, the polar plot end point shifted by -90 degrees. Pole means the order of the system is increased. If the order of the system is increased means, if for the third order system, if we add a pole, then it becomes fourth order system. Then polar plot end point shifted towards -90 degrees, that is in clockwise direction. If for fourth order system, if we add one pole, then it becomes fifth order system. Then the polar plot end point shift towards this. If a 0 means it is in numerator, so order will be decreases. If a 0 is added, then fourth order systems becomes third order system. Then +90 degrees, that is in anti-clockwise direction. End point shift +90 degrees, that is anti-clockwise direction. Now we are seeing some examples just by looking at the polar plot. Omega equals to 0, omega equals to infinity. It is minus 90 degrees and it is minus 180 degrees and minus 270 degrees and 0 degrees. Here magnitude is 1. Omega is increasing. It is a polar plot given. Based on this polar plot, we have to find out type number and order of the system. We have to find type and order of the system by looking at the polar plot only. Just look at the figure where polar plot starts from here. Here means it is the starting point. So type 0 system. It is a type number is 0. Type number 0 means no pole exists at origin. And then order. It ends in 4th coordinate. Here it is ending from here at here. So order number is 1. And we are seeing another example. This is another example. Here omega equals to 0. Here omega equals to infinity. 0 degrees, minus 90 degrees, minus 180 degrees, minus 270 degrees. And omega increasing like this. For this polar plot, we have to find type and order of the system. The polar plot starts from here, so type number is 1. Then and polar plot ends in the 2nd coordinates. 1st order, 2nd order, 3rd order. So order number is 3rd. Like this, we can solve many problems based on these two figures only. Thank you, friends.